Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healthcare Inspired Podcast. My name is Jennifer McNamara, and I am back. I'm very excited to be back for another episode. This is episode 6. We're going to talk about trust and transparency, and I have my trusty co-host, Miss Maya Turner. Welcome back, Maya.
Hello, everybody. Welcome
Oh,
back. I've missed you.
I know, right? I mean, we work together on
Yes,
projects, but
right.
I love being on screen with you and
I
sharing our
know.
passion with the world. So here we are.
Here we are. Hello again.
So it's very, very exciting to know that we have this option to share with the world. Now, oh my goodness, Maya, I love baseball. My husband and I, we watch baseball games all the time, and
Yeah,
we are
yeah, yeah.
huge. We're huge Boston Red Sox fans, and so I have to tell you, for my husband's anniversary this year, I surprised him with tickets to to Fenway Park in Boston. And so we're going to fly there right after the Ascent conference and we're going to spend some days in Boston. But I was watching the game. We watched the games, you know, and it got me thinking about teamwork. And it got
Yeah,
me thinking about, the sports teams in general. Like they have to trust each other, don't they? They have to
oh
work
yeah.
as a team, right?
Yes. And they have to understand the goal, and the goal is to win together.
Yes. And even like before they win, they're like their goal is okay, like I'm going to hit the ball and hopefully it's going to go pretty far. But if it
Exactly.
doesn't, I have to rely on my team. Like say for instance, we're the other team, like we don't want the hitter to get any runs, right? So you have these people on the bases, and so they have to work together, like communicate, and then the other team has to communicate as well if they want their team to win. So it's like either way, the goal is to win, like you said, but within that process, you have teamwork
And
and
plays.
plays, yes. And so I think about like the balls we throw to each other in healthcare in our teams, like
Yes.
we have our receptionists or our intake staff, and they're throwing balls at us. We're like, hey, here's the patient information, right? Here it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's hopefully accurate. And so we're sending it off, the coders, okay, I got it. I got my charges. Oh no, I'm sorry, go to the provider. Provider sees the patient, and then the provider's like, I'm done, signs off. That ball's now thrown to the coder, right? Maybe there's a process in between, we got prior authorization in there somewhere. But let's say, for instance, we're ready for you coders out there to take the ball. And you got
Yeah,
the ball, and you're like, oh, I'm stuck. I'm
yeah.
freezing and I don't know where to throw it next because I don't have the information I need. I'm missing
Yeah.
a piece. I don't have enough. And so it's like you can't throw the ball to the next teammate because you don't have what you need. And it's so frustrating.
Right.
And it's just
When you
like
should
one of
call the
those
timeout. You need to
timeout.
call.
Yes. I
Yes.
need timeout, guys. We need to take a timeout. So that's how I feel all the time. I feel
Yeah,
like it's like timeout. I don't have what I need. And just this week, I'm doing a credentialing project for a client, and I'm just like, oh, it's like I can't go forward. It's holding up claims, it's holding up revenue, but I don't have all the pieces, so I can't go. I'm like stuck in motion, like those old cartoons where they used to freeze you. Or you'd freeze, or like Zach Morris and Saved by the Bell, he would freeze everybody and do his thing, and it was just like that's how I feel. I feel like I'm a frozen character in a TV show. So it's just like, oh
Oh,
my
girl.
goodness.
Yes. And yeah, I like baseball too, actually. And my husband and I, when we were in California for the Compliance Institute conference, we went to go see Atanu before he got traded. And
Mm.
so he was so popular. But what I love, and this is, I think, a really good analogy, is that even though you could be the most popular player, you still have to be a part of the team, regardless of how popular you are. So I was watching all of his fans, and then I ran into Vigo Mortensen.
What?
Yeah, and he's really short. But
Really?
anyway, he's like, oh yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry, I just threw that out. I was like,
We
what?
digress.
I was a bit, yeah, okay. You know how we do. Okay, so anyway, I saw him and I had to do a double check, and he smiled at me, and I was like, oh my God, that's Vigo Mortensen. So anyway, to make a long story short, The object, even when you're the most popular player, even though you're the most utilized source in the office, right? You still have to be part of the team. You
Yes.
can't oversee it. You have to be part of this team, and you have to know how much your role affects everybody else. Because without a pitcher, the catcher can't catch. The catcher can't call if the pitcher doesn't throw, right? The ball can't be hit without the runner going to a base. So everybody has a role. They have to understand how important their role is for the game to continue to play.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep the game going. We're trying to keep
Yeah.
the office open. And
Yes.
it requires trust. And so that's why this episode's so important, because we're at a situation in the healthcare industry where we don't trust each other, or at least there's a feeling that there's lack of trust. There's a lot of stuff out there on the media, and the media is a dangerous place to be, a dangerous place to trust these days. You have to know where to go to get trustworthy information to do your job.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia. Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's funny. Like, you can go on Wikipedia and you can, like, there's been celebrities that have gone on. They're like, "Have you checked out what it says about me on Wikipedia?" Like, it's just, it's not accurate. So even people who are famous are like, "That's not me. Like, that's not that's not who I am." But anyway, so thinking about trust in healthcare is, I'm going to read definition that I want to get across here. It's about our patients, right? So I think about some of the things that we do in life that require trust. Marriage is a number one thing, right? That's a big one.
That's a big one.
Parent-child relationship, that's a big trust thing there. And then also healthcare, your physicians, like, you're trusting them to cut you open and make sure they sew you back up and make sure you get out of there alive.
And their opinions about how to treat you, right?
Yeah, exactly. So medication they're going to prescribe, you trust they're going to give you the right one. They're not going to give you all these meds that don't work together. They understand the implications of your disease and how to treat you, right? That's the patient-physician relationship. Then there's the physician-coder relationship, the physician-practice manager relationship or administrator, credentialing department in physician or, management, like compliance. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on that department, because that's one of the most important departments, and they're not trusted, or at least there's a semblance of that, where they're just the one you're afraid of, and you feel like you don't want to trust them, or you don't want to tell them things. And so I think about transparency, laying it all out on the table, laying your cards out, right?
Yeah.
This is what I have in front of me. This is what I want to show you. This is the truth.
Yeah.
100%. This is the truth.
Yeah.
And either people are afraid of the truth, or they don't know all the truth. They don't have the pieces.
Or they don't want to hear it, right?
They don't want to hear it. Because then they have to change.
or listen.
Or listen, yeah. It's too much effort, right, to listen and change. So that's where we are. We have to believe that our physicians have our best interest at heart, that we also have to make sure that we're, telling them everything that as a patient, the physicians have to trust us that we're giving them all the information. We're not holding anything back. So it's a two-way street. And I know I told everyone I would give you little tidbits of my new book on communication. This is a chapter in my book. So we're going to talk about, some of this, because it's important to think about what trust really means in healthcare. So being reliable, right? So when we think about reliability, what does that mean to you from your physician, Maya? Like, when you go to a physician, what do you think about when you think about them being reliable?
I think reliable and viable are synonymous terms, right? And there has to be transparency on both sides, right? The physician has to be transparent with what he's doing, and the coder has to be transparent on why they are saying that something needs to change, or even about the integrity of what he's doing is either right or wrong. And I think that's a point of contention, and I think that when there is the physician relationship and there is a coder relationship, there has to be trust, there has to be transparency. And I think part of the issue is that one thinks that they're bigger than the other, and they're really not.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to treating the patients, that the coder should respect the physician's job to do that. And then from the physician to the coder, there needs to be trust in order for them to get the payment and understand what that payment process is, whether it be documentation or not, but it has to happen regardless. Otherwise, the integrity of the payment is lost and the integrity of the relationship is never grounded.
Exactly. And, we have seen cases too, like in even the compliance concerns, we have those cases where there's fraud going on. Mm-hmm. And it's still appalling to me that we have these cases where you have coders involved in it, where that one case we had where all those things were happening and the coders got pulled into the fraud because they were in on it.
Yeah.
And so, the trust can go a little bit too far. Like, I feel like you need to trust your physicians, but if they're doing something wrong, then you need to trust the process.
Yeah.
And trust that if you do the right thing, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So whether or not the physician says, we're doing it this way or the highway, you have, as a coder, you have responsibilities to your credential, to the government, to what's right and wrong, regardless of what you're told. And so, yes, trust your physicians to a point until they start deviating and breaking that trust that we all have in them.
Right. I mean, and that's so important that you speak on this now. And I think because we're transitional in our season, right, as coders, because we started before there was this big, dilemma about the physician-coder relationship. Now the physician realizes that the coder is integral, but before it was the physician, I am, and now it's like, you're not really. But in my students, I'm teaching my students now that you have to be assertive. You have to start off being assertive. You have to start off with the communication that's understood and that's needed to negate trust and mitigate risk. Mm-hmm. And so from the perspective of learning and being a new coder, you have to understand that the more you are transparent about what your job is and what you are willing to educate and be assertive about, you're setting the tone for what can happen. And then that's when you say something. And then you also are setting the tone when you don't say something. So communication is beneficial on both ends. And it's a tool where both parties walk away understanding and not having a question about it or agreeing to disagree. So, I so totally agree. And I think this is so needed, but it needs to start off from the beginning. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Another quality that I find appealing in my physicians and in my manager, in my team, is empathy.
Yeah.
And what is empathy? There's many definitions of it, but it's feeling what the other person is feeling, even though you maybe have never gone through that. So maybe have never gone through a divorce before, but you can empathize with the feelings that a person might have, the breaking of trust in some way.
Yeah,
so you know what that feels like, because maybe you've had trust broken. Maybe you've not gone through the same exact experience, but you know what it feels like. And so that is something that I think we have lost, is the empathy for the patients, the empathy for the staff when they're overworked. And so when you're like, get the charges in regardless, and then you're like, but we had all of these mistakes last time, I need to slow down. Like, no, just keep going. And it's like, you want to keep going through that cycle, and there is a culture in hospitals of productivity standards that are just not, they're not up to par with what we have going on right now. You have a whole industry of coders that have just come out of the pandemic. They're coming out, and we all have come out of this. We're coming out of this situation where we were just torn down physically, emotionally, mentally, everything, and you're wanting them to have the same productivity as they did before, life's
Yeah.
different.
Life
Life
is
is so different. So quality over quantity is so much better, because think about, if you focus more on quantity, how much of that is really accurate, and how much of that
not.
are you actually paying out double for fixing the mistake when you could have just got it right the first time? Maybe it take a little bit longer, but it's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Quality beats quantity. Duh.
Start over.
Quality beats quantity all the time. Oh Lord, Q and Q, Lord Jesus. But like I said, I'm a firm believer, like like you were talking about communication, and it's so important to understand that when you communicate and when you um, understand the outcome of when it's wrong, you're careful to do it right. What if that's your mom? What if that's your grandmother? What if that's a cared loved one? What if that's your child? Think about if that were you, and put yourself in that position. That's what empathy is, putting yourself in the other person's position to a point where you can understand why it's happening and why you shouldn't if you put yourself in that position. And so, we gotta be better about understanding what the outcome is when it's wrong. Um,
Yeah.
Quantity is not going to be quality ever. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I have so much respect for coders and billers and auditors and those in the financial side, even my office managers who are put through the ringer all the time. So you might think your office manager is this like stone face and they have no soul and they don't understand you. But guess what? They are ripped to pieces by physicians all the time. And I love my physicians. I'm not putting you all in a box. I am putting some of you in a box because some of you have ripped me to pieces emotionally
yeah,
and put me through therapy, and you know who you are. You know who you are out there. But at the same time, I know what it's like to be in a position of leadership, torn down every day, having a physician yell at you every day because they didn't get it the way they wanted it,
yeah,
because they thought they had all the answers. And then you have, even your teammates thinking they know better than you. You have
right,
people been doing this 30 years. They never went to a coding class. They just did it. They never changed their process, but they 100% will tell you this is the way to do it. When you have actual evidence from CMS, the AMA, that says no, that's wrong, but they've
yeah.
never changed their process. So who's right? How do you get through
The
those kind
payment is
of,
right.
the
the,
payment is right?
the payment is right. And Jen, I will say this a million times. You could do something for a long time, and it doesn't change the fact that it's wrong. You have to be mindful of rules and regulations and the repercussions. That's my thing: rules, regulations, and repercussions. And we are in a society where the physician has to know that just because they see the patient, that doesn't mean that nobody else is important. And that goes back to my analogy earlier about going to see Atanu, right? Atanu was the most popular player. That doesn't mean that he's not part of the team. So the physician is still part of the team in the revenue cycle to make sure that the business is running. You can be the most popular. That doesn't mean that you're less important, and it doesn't mean that you're more important. It just means that you're part of the team and that we all need to play in the sandbox together. And the more we understand how fluid that process needs to be, the better the outcome when it comes to revenue cycle and the integrity of payment.
Absolutely. Another thing is competence, right? Oh, capital C.
Yes.
I love my healthcare teams and I help them any chance I get. If you work in healthcare, I respect you because I'm right there alongside you. I've been there. But if you don't know the answer to something and you don't know how to do your job efficiently and you feel that, there is nothing wrong with asking for help, and there is nothing wrong with saying, I need more education, or going out and getting it for yourself. If you want to do your job correctly and you want to do it right.
Yeah.
And yes, there are people that have been coding and billing for years without a credential. There's no rule that says you have to have a credential, of course, unless your employer requires it. And the reason why employers want these credentials is because they come with a level of competence based on the education you have to put out there or put in your head to get that credential and then to keep it. So that's why organizations tend to want it, because you're going to be a person that has to keep educated. And in order to keep those credentials, you have to get CEUs, and hopefully you're going to be able to show your competence over time. So it's twofold. You got to keep your credential, and then you also have to show through your actions that you understood how to be efficient with your credential.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I think, especially when it comes to credentials, just because you get it doesn't mean it stops the learning process. That's why you get continuing education units. There's a reason for that, and I think, you and I we're in that generation Z. No, well, anyway, we're in some generation where we're not dependent upon someone else doing it. We're not dependent upon automation. We're not dependent on our phones. We believe in tangibility. We believe in educating, and it is a continual process. Just because you got your certification doesn't mean that you need to stop studying what you've learned to get it. It's ongoing because you need to maintain the certification, because if you don't get the CEUs, you lose your credential, and it's just, to me, it's just all relative and it's all important, but you have to make sure that you understand the importance of it.
Absolutely. And then there's financial transparency. Patients trust that those handling their finances, their personal information are going to protect it. But also, when they come to the front office and they say, hey, I need to know about my bill, and you can't explain it to them, that's really going to tell them a lot about your competence.
Oh, yeah.
And then the fact that the physician would hire you and not train you because they're paying for a service, right? I mean, they're paying for that service, and they expect that service to be not just the clinical part, the actually taking care of their health, but also, the insurance they pay money for. They want to make sure it's being used and it's being processed correctly. It all affects them down the road. And so patients perceive practices in a certain way. There's a reputation that certain practices might have that can be tarnished over time if it's not efficient. And those are some of the things that influence them. Now, in the book that comes out August 30th, so our book drops August 30th on the communication, one of the chapters is on cultural competence. And it's also kind of closely related to trust, because a lot of patients of different cultures, they tend to trust others of their same culture. And we're seeing this a lot in current society, where you have patients who want to see the same nationality or same culture as them because they're going to understand their healthcare. If they want to practice a hybrid approach of Western medicine, but also natural, they want to know if it's okay. Like, I like this. My beliefs means I want this in my body, and I don't want that in my body. It's very common among, cancer patients, where they want to heal themselves differently, but they also want to know their options. So sometimes physicians don't understand a culture and where this comes from. So it's important for them to get educated on the cultures that exist and why they exist that way. So they can just learn and be like, hey, they think this way because of this. So I have to approach it from this aspect. So
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I remember when CJ was on. Remember when CJ was on, and he had a lot to say. And it's really interesting because the way that he explained the way that they practice medicine was based upon what works with what population, right? I don't want to go to a doctor that that's a nationality that doesn't understand me. But again, I want to go to a specialist that understands how to treat me as a person, to treat me as a patient. And so when you get into cultures and nationalities, and I'm going to be very careful when you say that, do you really know if the best optimal outcome is staying with culture or going with the most qualified or with the best statistics. And I think, and I'll tell a story about my grandmother. My grandmother, God rest her soul, I loved her dearly, right? And she had cancer. And she was going to her doctor, which was the same nationality, and they were treating her because she was in a hospice stage, right? But the hospice people who the doctor recommended, and we don't know if there was something going on there, Stark, whatever, and that happens a lot, right? Think about, and they weren't treating her. So I said, okay, well, let me get into this. I got involved. I got another company. They weren't the same, but her outcome and quality of life was different because of the treatment, not the culture. Hear me? And so the outcome was different, but she wasn't comfortable because it wasn't them. So at the end of the day, she wound up going back with the same, and she wound up expiring sooner than what I had hoped. But at the end of the day, you could see night and day the difference between the better treatment versus the culture. So, we as a community of patients, as a community of coders, we got to look at the broader picture. We got to look at the broader picture of communication. We got to look at the broader picture of culture. And you have a choice. You have a choice of having quality, or you have a choice of, whatever the outcome is by going outside of that quality, not quantity. So, and when you think about employers, it's the same thing. Do you want an employer that has a lot of people that are unhappy, or a small practice that has a handful of people and they've all been there for 30 years and they're all happy? So, there's a big, big difference when it comes to that. And then, you got to think about how they communicate. If they're communicating and they're a small practice and they've been there for 30 years, they're doing something right. But if you have a large organization where there's an employee leaving every other day, that's got to make you think about how they're communicating, or if there's any communication at all. And the quality of employment, not the quantity of employment. So that's a really good point. And I just wanted to make that, assessment, because I've seen it myself. I've seen it myself.
Yeah. I mean, and you look into a culture like that and you realize quickly where it starts, like where the holes are. Is it the physician? Is it the manager? Is it the team itself going behind their backs and telling on each other? Oh, they did this wrong. They did this wrong. And so it's like, we're kind of like a family when we work together like that. And, yeah, we're going to have moments where we get on each other's nerves, but at the same time, we have to trust each other to take care of the patients that we're required to, to take care of. And of course, this next question is, what are some of the factors that are challenging trust right now? And one of the big ones, and I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, is misinformation, because of where you get your information. Now, I am 100% an advocate of knowing how to take care of yourself and your own body. But where you get your information should be different. So like if a mechanic wanted to get information about how to fix a car, he's not going to go to the CDC. And the CDC is not going to go looking to them for advice on disease and how to take care of that. So there's just like, you go to where the experts are. Now, I do not care like where you grew up or what. You have to be able to make decisions for yourself with the right information.
Yeah.
I am not about telling people how to, whether do natural or not, but there comes a point where you can't just eat fruits and vegetables to heal a fracture, right? Like that's not going to cure a broken leg. There are times, yes, where natural medicine is so great for you. You can maybe start feeling better if you have a digestive issue. Like I got to change the way I'm eating, right? And maybe you don't want to do certain things, but there comes a point where there's only one fix, and it's surgery. Yeah, or cancer is another story, but people trust or they don't. And so if they don't trust it, they don't trust it. But it doesn't mean that it does not effective, overall.
Yeah.
So you choose how you want to be treated, what you want in your body, but just know the facts and get accurate information.
And not Dr. Google.
Not Dr. Google. So, and people always ask me like, "Oh, what podcast are you listening to right now?" And I'm going to tell you, I recently listened to one, and maybe it's a little bias from you. Sometimes you listen to these and their bias is towards one way or the other. Right. But from a compliance standpoint, I found it very interesting. I didn't care about the ethical, natural versus Western medicine, but it's called Dr. Miracle. And you remember back in the 90s or late 2000s, the alkaline diet was real popular. Yeah. Well, there was like this doctor, I guess. He wasn't a real doctor. Come to find out, he would convince patients that he could cure cancer by alkalizing your body with not eating fruits and vegetables, but juicing them. And that's all you do. You just juice fruits and vegetables, and he wouldn't let them chew anything. Like he said, chewing is not, and he was injecting them with baking soda and water, IVs. Okay. And so there is a lot of talk about right or wrong, but from a compliance standpoint, that's where my brain went, because we know as soon as you break the skin, you're performing surgery. And so it's like from a medical board standpoint, because I did credentialing and we understand it's against the law to do that. That's practicing medicine. And if you're not a licensed physician, which he was not, he broke the law. And he still to this day would not admit that he did anything wrong, because he was helping patients. He was helping them feel better. Even though they ended up dying from their cancer, he still to this day claims that he cured them. And I'm just like, but this is the thing, is like, this is why we have trust issues, is because people, they get so drawn into the hope, right? It's the hope that draws them in. And then they forget all other logic when it comes to the legal aspects of being treated by a physician. And so that's where my brain went. Forget the other stuff, which is also, opinion based and it can be biased. But for me, I was listening to it from the compliance aspect and like the legal aspect. Like, how could people not know he wasn't a real doctor? Like, I don't know. I just don't know.
He's seeing them, and how did they get authorization, and how did they get informed consent?
Well, listen to the podcast. I'm not going to answer all the questions because if you're interested, it'll just blow your mind. It's like 5-6 episodes. Dr. Miracle. Yeah. Okay. It was just like blew my mind. And so I don't want to ruin all the details for you, but I listened to the 5-6 episodes, and I want your thoughts on it. It's one of those, I love controversial podcasts, and I love like the stuff that just makes you think. But my brain again went to the compliance part. That's always what I think of when I listen to these podcasts. It's like, oh, that's not right. That's just wrong.
Girl, my question is going like, did he get sued, or did he go to jail? I mean, what? Okay, I'm not. I'll listen to it.
Listen to it, yeah. So we think about the steps to building trust, open communication. Transparency. So if your patient comes in and said, I want to see all that you've billed my insurance for, are you going to show them? Are you going to explain accurately what happened? Right? If you messed up and you didn't submit a prior authorization, are you going to lie about it? Are you going to admit when you're wrong, when you made a mistake? If you didn't send the paperwork in to get a physician credentialed, are you going to lie about it? Are you going to blame somebody else? Or are you going
make them pay for your mistakes?
Right. Which it happens, which is why I tell my grandparents, don't pay your bills until you talk to me. Let me see your bills. Don't pay stuff. And then so the amazing Jared Walker with $4. I just love. Yes. He's amazing. And he's one of my favorite people in the whole world. Shout out to Jared Walker and all of you at $4.
Hey, Jared.
Amazing. So because of what he does, him and his team, they are breaking all the rules and of just like what people think is a rule, but it's like they're breaking all kinds of roadblocks, and they're getting bills written off. Because one of the things that he said on the podcast when I had him on a few podcasts ago, he said millions of Americans are paying for bills they don't have to. Yeah. And they don't even know there's the lack of transparency. Now, where you live in Chicago, when I took with my father-in-law, we went to have his heart surgery up at U Chicago Med. And I was just so amazed at how transparent they were. Their charity care program was in the elevator on a sign, like you could see it. There was a QR code and everything. So, but you go to my hospital and you have to pull teeth to try to find it. And so it's like, why is there a difference? Why are you trying to hide it? You're required. Most hospitals, depending on their status, I mean, they're required to have it. And so it's like, why would you hide that? And so there's all kinds of ins and outs there. You know, Jared's the man, he can explain it to you. But I think it's important that we think about the transparency aspect of trust. Don't be afraid. And I've been in situations where the manager's like, don't tell him that. Or the doctor's like, don't tell him that. Why not? Like, I don't like this. Stay in your lane. Don't tell them information. But and there's a difference in holding back information they don't need to know at that time. But I'm not going to push things under the rug to save you embarrassment or to save you from a lawsuit that you created.
Right. Do you remember? I think Terry was on compliance the Compliance Monday, where they all were on there, and she was talking about how she was looking at a claim and she realized that the patient shouldn't have paid, and then wound up the patient's bill was really $12 and they were trying to bill them much more than that. And she was saying that she was even auditing a claim on behalf of the payer, but she spoke up because she knew it wasn't right. And that's part of understanding that regardless of whose side you're on, the integrity and the communication behind the integrity and the intent behind that is everything. And communicating that and not being afraid to do so. I was very impressed when I heard that. I was like, wow. Yeah, I know they didn't like what I did. Yeah.
Well, Terry's good people. I'm just saying. Yeah. She's one of my most favorite people in the world, and I respect her so much. And she's a good person, like Christine and you and Kim. Like, you all know who you are. And you're ethical people. And so that's what compliance is. And so everything we do, whether we're billing, coding, physician, anyone, compliance should be number one, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. And on that note, guys, I hope you're going to attend the Inspired Compliance Seminar on December 7th of this year. So excited. We have pulled out all the stops. We have Dawn Self. We have Rhonda Buckholes. We have the amazing Susan Wahlberg, who literally has wrote the book on compliance.
Yes.
We have Betty Hovey, Sunil Patel. The list goes on. So I hope you'll join us for this conference. It's going to be on December 7th, 2024. It's all day, 7 CEUs. So here's the QR code. You can sign up. I hope that you'll attend with us. It's all virtual, by the way. So again, you don't have to go anywhere. You can be in your jammies and get your CEUs. So please, please, please scan that QR code and join us. It's going to be a great time. So yes. So I want to thank everyone for joining today. And we gave you a lot of stuff. We didn't hold back. We may have said some controversial things, but hey, it's our platform. So, if you don't agree with me, you don't agree with me, that's fine. We are humans. We can have our own opinion, and it's great. So,
and we still should respect each other because we have our own opinions. That's it.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be boring if we all thought the exact same thing all the time?
Yeah.
You're like, what are you thinking about? Apples. Me too. Really? Oh, I love it. So stay tuned for next week. We are going to talk more about compliance next week. We're going to do a lot more talk on that, and then watch for more events coming your way and more education. And I do want to leave on this note. I always like to give you some tips, and so we're going to start sprinkling in some tips for coding. And so one of the things I wanted to point out, I got a question, our membership that we have, sometimes our members will write into us and ask questions. So our tip for the week is on excision versus incision. Now, if you look in your CPT code book, many of the codes will be split up on the type of procedure, right? So when you're learning to code, you open your CPT code book published by the American Medical Association, and you're going to see that you have, like, I'm going to pick on orthopedics, for instance. So orthopedics, for instance, you have different types of procedures, whether it's incision, excision, introduction, you have fractures, you have reconstruction. So whatever they're doing to that body part, they're going to tell you, this is what it is. You can incise or otomy, right? Make an incision into the body, and you can remove fluid, incision and drainage. You can take a piece maybe, or maybe it's a cyst, right? And you're not going to remove the cyst, you're just going to drain it. And so that's an incision. You're not removing the cyst. You are just incising and going in and doing something to it. Excision, of course, is excising or removing to an extent. Now, excision can mean biopsy, taking a piece of that structure and taking it out, or removing the whole thing, right? In many cases. And that's CPT language. I won't go into PCS because that's a whole different animal with inpatient coding. But I just wanted to give you that kind of reminder, because when I get questions like this, like, they're almost wanting me, I don't want to tell you how to code something, because if I tell you how to code it, you're not going to learn why. So it's like, you can teach a person to fish, and it's so much better than if you fish for them, right? So it's like, you have to teach them how to take care of themselves. So I encourage you, if you have questions, I am all about helping you, but I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm going to show you where to go. I'm going to help you walk the process through your head. Like, okay, this is why this is the case. And this is why this is the case. What's the difference between these procedures? Why are the codes different? There's a reason why they're different, right? Do you have anything to add, Maya? Any tips of wisdom?
You know, I'm learning this now as I'm going through teaching again. Know medical terminology and understand the language of medicine, right? And I think the biggest thing is to know how to unravel the string. So if you know that an arthroscopy and the difference between an arthroplasty is the difference of using a scope and a repair, know when you look at the note, the doctor is going to be looking at through a camera, and a repair is the doctor is going to be looking to fix something because of something. They're going to have indications. So know how to unravel the string, and know that the operative report, when it comes to that, is all about unpacking the word or the procedure that's being performed. Because you have a lot of note bloat, but understanding that the note bloat means something, and it's all pointing to a procedure or procedures. And they have to say the reason why they're doing it for you to find it.
Absolutely. So these are just some tips that we wanted to give you. We'll have new tips every week, just because we want to keep you focused. And of course, we're not going to tell you the answer, but we're going to walk you through the process, thinking about the why behind everything. Why does this exist? Why do we do it? Because when I was a kid, I was like, oh, they would just say, do it because I said so. I'm like, why? So every kid wants to know why. Like, you always ask when you're a kid, you're like so curious, and because you don't know anything yet, and you're trying to figure the world out, and you're like, but what? So as you're learning to be a coder or whatever you're doing, ask why. When we stop asking why, we stop learning, and we don't get very far in life.
Yeah. Open your mouth when you don't understand something. It'll save you a lot of trouble and heartache.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. Happy August. I'm just so excited that fall's almost here. So let's give